right, committee, we're going to go ahead. They'll come up here in a minute. Go ahead and get started. And Scott, if you would like to explain House Bill 2174 briefly, I'd appreciate it.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Happy to. Good afternoon, committee. House Bill 2174 comes to this committee from the Committee on Appropriations. The bill did receive a hearing in the Appropriations Committee about a month ago and was then referred to this committee. This bill is identical to House Bill 2522 from last year, as it was amended by the House Committee on Appropriations during last session. The bill would establish the Rural Hospital Innovation Grant Program for the purpose of strengthening and improving the healthcare system and access to healthcare services in counties other than Douglas, Johnson, Sedgwick, Shawnee, and Wyandotte counties. The program would be administered by KDHE. These grants would be awarded for the purpose of providing transitional assistance to hospitals in those eligible counties, including changing the hospital's current healthcare delivery model to a model that's more appropriate for the community. Allowable expenditures under the bill would include a market study of healthcare services needed and provided in the community, acquiring new technological tools and infrastructure, and acquiring the services of appropriate personnel. There's a process for applying for a grant for counties under the bill. The county would include a description of the hospital that would receive the grant monies, a statement of the amount of grant money requested, a description of the hospital's needs, and any other information required by the Secretary of KDHE. It would require KDHE to enter into a written agreement with a county prior to awarding any grants under the program, and would impose some reporting requirements between the county and the Secretary of KDHE within 1 year of awarding any grant under the program. It also has clawback type provisions requiring the county to repay all money received from a grant if the county fails to satisfy any material term or condition of the agreements or any other terms and conditions required by the Secretary. The bill would transfer $10 million from the State General Fund to a newly created Rural Hospital Innovation Grant Fund, and any grant under the program Have I been muted this whole time?
No, Scott, you weren't, but think twice about a doctor in this room. I'm just saying. Go right ahead, Scott.
So am I starting from the beginning?
No.
Okay, where did you lose me?
About 4 seconds.
Yeah, about 4 or 5 seconds. That's all we lost.
Okay, so I guess I'll repeat the part about $10 million would be transferred from the State General Fund to a newly created special revenue fund called the Rural Hospital Innovation Grant Fund. Any funds awarded under the program would have to be matched by private stakeholders on a basis of $2 of private stakeholder money to $1 of state monies awarded from the grants. The program and the fund would be established on the bill's effective date, which would be July 1 of this year, and would expire on July 1 of 2025. And I would be happy to answer any questions.
Committee, are there questions of Scott? All right, looks like you did a great explanation and you answered everyone's questions before they thought of them. So thank you. We will now proceed, committee. We've got a proponent, Tara Mays, with the Vice President, State Legislative Relations, Kansas Hospital Association. Welcome to committee, Tara.
Somebody tall was here before me. Thank you, Madam Chair, members of the committee. Appreciate the opportunity to appear before you on behalf of our association's 122 member hospitals throughout the state of Kansas in strong support of House Bill 2174. While I have appeared before this committee before to discuss the importance of the rural emergency hospital designation to our Kansas hospitals that are most financially vulnerable due to the unique challenges that they face, I want to stress the importance of how House Bill 2174 before you today provides some of the critically necessary complementary efforts to the rural emergency hospital legislation. When I appeared before your committee earlier this session, Madam Chair, to discuss the merits of House Bill 2261, your committee asked some very thoughtful questions about the process that communities, boards, hospital leadership would go through to be able to convert their services to a rural emergency hospital. House Bill 2174 is a complementary piece of legislation to the contents of both House Bill 2261 that was passed out of this committee earlier this legislation, as well as Senate Bill 175, which passed out of the Senate on a vote of 39-0. Your committee asked some questions about wanting to know more about how communities might transition from a current critical access hospital to a rural emergency hospital. And during my testimony, I mentioned that there would be a process that leadership would go through in hospitals and in communities to be able to make that conversion. The process would likely look like it would require hospitals to have an in-depth financial analysis, in-depth modeling analysis about the current services that are provided at that critical access hospital, and a series of public input meetings and conversations to make that transition. All of that transition would occur with some of our hospitals that are struggling the most financially today. And to be able to best serve those particular hospitals, it would require all of those kind of services to be done at an expense to those. Things like financial services auditing, in-depth services modeling likely are not something that can be done currently today by our critical access hospitals. They don't typically have experts on staff that do those kind of things in those particular fields. So with that level of information that's needed and that would be needed likely by outside consultants with expertise in those areas, this bill really does allow us to be able to cover some of those expenses. All of those services are critical to making good information with the communities that they serve. In addition, if transition to a new delivery system would require additional investments in services like EMS or other core infrastructures, this gives our communities a tool to be able to look at ways to make those critical investments. House Bill 2174 would allow for true public-private partnerships in the most pure sense to be able to assist our Kansas hospitals in transitional assistance, as Scott mentioned, which is defined in this bill to mean any assistance related to changing a hospital's current healthcare delivery model. We know that our healthcare system has to remain agile and responsive to the changing needs of communities that they serve, whether that's through a pandemic, whether that's through population changes, ever-evolving regulatory changes, or anything that life might throw at our healthcare delivery system. House Bill 2174 helps our communities to do their homework, to make good decisions when alternative models of healthcare delivery might make sense for them. Our health systems across the state are all their own unique ecosystems, but they are very intricately intertwined between regions and throughout our entire state. While this bill is aimed at creating an opportunity for our state's rural hospitals, those benefits are sure to be felt across the system and across our state. While we know House Bill 2174 alone cannot solve all of the problems for our state's hospitals, it does help to complement the good efforts of this committee on the rural emergency hospital legislation. While I mentioned the rural emergency hospital legislation in Senate Bill 125, we are really, really happy with the efforts that this committee took on in that conversation, and we think 2174 would be a great complement to those discussions and efforts, and I would be happy to stand for questions at the appropriate time, Madam Chair.
All right, thank you, Terry. We've got one more in-house proponent, and then take questions after that. Then I have Wendy Stark, the League of Kansas Municipalities. Welcome to committee.
Good afternoon, and thank you, Madam Chair and committee, for allowing the League of Kansas Municipalities to testify in support of House Bill 2174. what affects rural hospitals affects our cities, and we have 625 cities in the state of Kansas. According to the Kansas Hospital Association, they report that 47% of rural hospitals nationally are operating at a financial loss, and 75 Kansas rural hospitals are in danger of closing. Many rural hospitals need to change the way they operate in order to meet the needs of their communities. And tools and legislation such as House Bill 2174 and, as Tara just mentioned, Senate Bill 175 can help those rural hospitals adjust to a model better suited to serve their community. Many of the independent hospitals in Kansas were originally owned by cities and are supported by the city community. Historically, there's a very close relationship between hospitals and their cities, with fundraising groups within the city and with tangible city assistance. In recent years, that support has taken the form of charging only token accounts for leasing the building, abating utilities, or providing support through sales tax. And just for example, from a few cities, the city of Fredonia has supported the Fredonia Regional Hospital since 1986 through a 1% citywide sales tax. Over the last 10 years, the tax has provided over $3.8 million to ensure the hospital has remained accessible. The hospital is currently the 4th largest employer in the city, and its loss would severely impact the city's economic future. The city of Coffeyville provides financial support to its hospital with a half-cent sales tax, which equals about $825,000 per year. The city of Columbus leases property to the hospital for $1. The city of Harrington financially supports its hospital with a $6,000 per year sales tax proceeds. And the city of Neodesha supports its hospital with a 1-cent sales tax, which was equal to about $237,000 in 2016. One of the reasons that we are testifying in support is because this is so important to our cities. In addition, there are several hospitals that are owned by municipalities, such as Fredonia, Arc City, Sedan, and Harrington. So we would just welcome an assurance that cities in eligible counties where municipal-owned hospitals are located could apply directly to the Secretary with a grant application. And thank you for allowing us the opportunity to offer testimony and support, and I'd be happy to stand for questions at the appropriate time. Thank you.
Thank you, Wendy. And I think you had talked earlier about the issue of the municipalities. Couldn't they just go to the county commissioners and then it runs through the county that way?
That is several of our cities have mentioned that the county doesn't have those taxes, and that I would have to go back. I mean, they probably could go through the counties, but that everything right now is operating through the municipality.
Okay, because I did take and visit with the person that drafted this, and that was his question to me. He felt like it could go through the counties, and that would cover the municipalities. Thank you. Committee, are there further questions? Oh, Representative Bishop electronically, and then I'll come to Representative Barker and then Representative Kelly.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. And I think that was pretty much my question too, in looking at the bill where it talks about private entities, whether or not that could include a city or a county or a public entity that, in other words, would be providing the match from other taxpayer dollars. That's the clarification I'm looking for.
All right, thank you. Representative Barker.
Thank you, Madam Chair. This would be for Tara Mays. Presently, we have in statute rural access hospitals, and they get additional reimbursement because their designation as a rural access hospital. This is not changing that designation. This rural access hospital would be in addition to?
Yeah, thank you so much for that question. Thank you, Madam Chair. The question is a good one. So this does not change critical access hospital designations. It doesn't require any critical access hospital to become a rural emergency hospital. It just allows them the opportunity to explore that as an additional option. Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you for the question.
Representative Kelly.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And just wondering on your question on the money going through counties, I mean, I don't know whether this would be an issue, but some counties like mine have two, and whether there would be, if one was in one situation, one was in another, could it be designated for a specific city in the county, like Coffeyville was mentioned?
Well, we can do almost anything.
Oh.
It's just whether or not that's the right path for us to take.
Yeah, that's what I wasn't sure, maybe why municipalities had been in there, because there could be competing hospitals or something that had created an issue. But I can definitely testify that this would have been a critical piece that, if it would have been in legislation, might have saved the Independence Hospital in connection with the rural emergency.
Yep. Representative Blex.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I think this question is for Tara. Just how many more dollars, since the hospitals are seemingly really struggling, even with half-cent city sales tax, et cetera, if we pass this and it gets passed, how much more dollars are they going? Is the reimbursement going to be that much enough to sustain those from getting them out of where they're already at, or not?
Thank you for the question. I think you're asking specifically about the reimbursement rates for the rural emergency hospitals, if I'm not mistaken. And I don't know that I can answer an actual amount in reimbursement adjustments that would be made to a rural emergency hospital as compared to a critical access hospital, because as a lot of times happens, a federal legislation like what was passed in the CARES Act in December 2020 comes down that allows a rural emergency hospital designation, and then the state statute, which you all are discussing, to allow that designation occurs. And then there's a level of guidance that comes out of the CMS agency, and that really dictates more of the dollars and cents about the actual reimbursement rates, and those details are not yet worked out. But some original analysis would make it to where some of our most financially vulnerable hospitals could be able to look at it. We know that much. We just don't have the exact amount, and we'll wait for CMS guidelines to be able to kind of do a little more digging on that.
Well, a follow-up on that, it looks like to me that unless we can get an additional reimbursement for going to that classification, which Montgomery somewhat has it, I affectionately call our Labette Health our transfer station, to where they bring them in. We have an emergency room, which we're confined, and then anything that's critical trauma, they're transferred to Parsons or somewhere else. And that seems to be working for a town of near 9,000 people. But, you know, I'm hearing all over my district of hospitals that have all these things, and Coffeyville being a good example, and are struggling. And yet, you know, I'm not hearing anything that there's going to be a better reimbursement rate. I mean, and I realize this may be better than just shutting the doors. I understand that as an option, but, you know, there's going to have to be some change in reimbursement rates for them to basically say, we're not going to have a hospital anymore, or we're going to this classification. We're entering into agreement with a hospital 90 miles away as a trauma lift station, so to speak, and boom, I don't know. I'd like to have some more information on that, just what reimbursement would be.
Okay, yeah, I think Representative is, you know, we're kind of dealing with two bills here today. So House Bill 2174 is a grant program for rural hospitals. And then we have House Bill 175 that is the rural hospital designation that we passed out of here on February the 16th. And so the granting piece is to give up to $10 million for rural hospitals to be able to apply for that as they need assistance. The rural hospital designation piece came down from the federal government, and it's something we've waited many, many years for, because there's some of these hospitals that they have, in order to, and I don't have the exact number in my head, but they have to maintain X number of beds to be classified as a hospital. So if they could downsize somewhat, they would no longer be a hospital. With this new designation, they can still be a hospital and downsize on the beds. I want to say it's 20, around to 25, between 0 and 25 beds, somewhere in there, yes. Does that help? This has nothing to do, absolutely nothing, and never has, about reimbursement rates.
Okay, thank you for clarifying that.
Yeah. Representative Carlson.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And I'm going to be a broken record because I know I've asked you this before, Tara, but it's important to me that if financially things should change and the hospital would like to apply to be back where it was, there is a method to do that, correct?
I appreciate that question, and just to be very clear, yes, there is nothing in the legislation that should a hospital change to become an emergency hospital, and even if they would utilize the services of House Bill 2174, they wouldn't necessarily be prevented from changing back to a critical access hospital. And if I could just go back to one other comment that was made, this is absolutely about providing service and right-sizing service, and this is just one tool in the tool belt to be able to allow our hospitals to keep their doors open. And appreciate the comments about how they've been innovative in the past to keep their doors open and how that has worked in communities across Kansas. So appreciate that.
If I may, Madam Chair.
Right, and nobody's required to, downsize if they choose not to downsize. It gives those communities, I think, for example, Fort Scott would be a classic example. If Fort Scott had the ability to downsize, and they've been able to remain a hospital, but because of the federal designation, that has nothing to do with the state. They could not do that and remain a hospital.
And I understand. I was from Southeast Kansas, but I am for this. I'm in favor of doing this, but there's still going to be some loss of jobs here because we're going to downsize. So it's a whole lot better than losing the hospital, absolutely. But I think still there could be some losses. We just have to, recognize that and be able to, talk about if that happens to a hospital in one of our districts, that sometimes nothing is perfect, but you have to take the best of what we have. So thank you.
Well, Representative, as you said, it's either, if they're going to downsize, there's a reason that they're having to downsize. That means that they're not viable at their current size. So it could be 0 hospital, or they downsize and they're able to remain with services out in those communities. Tara?
Appreciate that, Madam Chair, and appreciate the comments. I just want to be very clear. The hospitals that would be looking at doing this are probably, as you mentioned, Madam Chair, already financially vulnerable. So they've already probably made a lot of those employment adjustments trying to save them. So it really save themselves, really. So it really is just another tool in their tool belt. And I don't think it would have a significant impact in a lot of those places on jobs per se. But I appreciate the comment and opportunity to clarify.
Representative Turner?
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair. I'm just trying to play along here. So to your comments, you talked about you visited with the originator of this bill. Where did this bill originate, or who introduced it, I guess?
Pro Tem Finch in appropriations.
Okay, all right, thanks. And as you said, we're dealing with 2 different ideas or 2 different bills today. One of them is going to kind of create that rural hospital model that, as I understood it, basically right sizes them, I'll call that, or downsizes them, and it's a more efficient operating model. So so the need is that is not yet enough of a boost, and we need this additional grant program in order to affect the desired outcome here. Is that
Tara,
kind of why these are blended? Thank you.
Yeah, I definitely appreciate that question as well. So the reason why this is a great complementary bill is, as I mentioned in my testimony, there are going to be a lot of steps along the process that these financially vulnerable hospitals will have to take. A lot of it requires a financial analysis that's very in-depth. A lot of it would require a services analysis to make sure that they know what current codes are being used in that critical access hospital today to be sure that they're maintaining patient care if they transition to a rural emergency hospital. Being able to utilize the contents of 2174 for some of those services would be a great resource to be able to allow those hospitals to not take another financial hit in making that transition and doing their due diligence to do their homework to make sure that is done in the right way.
Well, and if I recall correctly, and I don't know, maybe Representative Parker recalls, but I believe that we heard testimony in appropriations on this, and there's some communities out there that have some folks that want to, step up to the plate and donate money. And this comes in and provides for every $2 that they put in, then the state matches $1 of that. So there has to be buy-in from the community itself.
Okay, and then we heard testimony also about the tax, you know, there's a half-cent sales tax, Coffeyville, several cities were named, but so what happens to those sources and those funds that are being raised specifically to support these hospitals? Do those continue, or does this supplant those things or take its place?
I don't believe it supplants or take its place. I think it enhances it.
Exactly. It would not replace those unless they voted to remove those taxes. But right now, this is an enhancement to help them.
Anytime that we can give a grant, and I always think it's a good idea when the state wants to come in and help out on a project, anytime we can do a matching grant is so much nicer than just handing them money, because then you know that you definitely have buy-in from the community itself.
But the source of the match isn't that sales tax revenue, correct? So if they've got a half-cent sales tax, this grant is not matching that.
No,
so that could, in a future election, they could say, we don't need this anymore. We're moving on, and we've got other sources for funding. One of them is the grant program, et cetera. Is that fair? Okay.
Yeah, but that's a community decision. Are there further questions? Oh, Representative Efley, did you have a question?
I'm getting damaged for having my mic on. I'm sorry. But anyway. Thank you, Madam Chair. So as I look at our former House Bill 2261, now in the new life form of Senate Bill 175, same thing. Those are kind of federally, those are federal programs, and I understand that. But House Bill 2174 is a state program, and again, I'm going to go back to those poor communities like Fort Scott, Independence, I can name them, Oswego, Horton. These grants would not have any ability to help them now because they are no longer hospitals. This is only for existing hospitals in the House Bill 2174. Is that correct in my understanding? The way it's written right now.
Madam Chair, I do believe it's for existing hospitals, both 2174 and the rural emergency hospital.
Yeah. So if we made any change in the state grant program for hospitals, it would be a significant change to make for those, to provide for those communities that have lost their hospital. So, okay. Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you.
Are there further questions? Did you have a question? Are there any further questions? All right, seeing none. Committee, we've got, you also have written only testimony from Michelle Colombo with the Kansas Medical Society and John Donnelly with Kansas Farm Bureau. Is there anyone else that had expected to testify that I did not call on? All right, seeing none, that closes the hearing on House Bill 2174. And committee, we're going to look at Senate Bill 175, and I believe that Dave made sure that you all had a copy of that bill. That bill is, and correct me if I'm wrong, Scott Abbott, that is a duplicate of House Bill 2261 that we passed, that we had a hearing on and passed out on February 16th. Is that correct?
Yes, Madam Chair. I would point out that the Senate's Public Health and Welfare Committee did make one minor amendment in committee to the insurance provision to make the language a little bit more general to apply to all coverage that's referred to in the section. Nothing that I would characterize as terribly substantive, but there is that one minor amendment that makes it slightly different from the version that this committee passed out of committee.
All right. Does everyone understand what we're getting ready to do? We will take Senate Bill 175 and amend it with House Bill 2174. Are there questions? Representative Parker.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I just wanted to clarify, we're combining them or we are replacing the contents of 175?
No, combining. Okay. I'm sorry.
That was what I was assuming, but I just wanted to make sure. Thank you.
Yeah, we don't like to assume. We know what that does to each one of us. Are there other questions? Representative Kelly.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So did that one small change that Scott mentioned, did that take care of kind of aligning the rates Okay.
Well,
Of the critical access hospitals and the new rural emergency hospital where it wasn't maybe completely clear or not?
I don't think that was the amendment, was it, Scott, that the Senate did?
Madam Chair, no, the amendment the Senate made, let me pull it up so I can refer to it specifically. This was on page 3 of Senate Bill 175, the Senate committee version. You'll see there's some in lines 21 through 24, and then a little bit more in 29 and 30, some language stricken, and then kind of a catch-all and all coverage language was inserted instead. This refers strictly to insurance coverage and benefits provided, and just aligns the insurance reimbursement rate for services provided by this new category of rural emergency hospital, as if they were covered and performed by a general hospital.
All right. Terry, did you have something to add, or is that?
Yes, so I just wanted to make sure everybody was clear. The change that they made in the Senate side was really just to make sure that what their coverage is at a new rural emergency hospital would be the same as it is as a critical access hospital. We had tried to technically just clean up the language when we introduced the legislation originally. We went back to the critical access hospital language at the comfort of all of the folks that were talking and negotiating on this bill. So
Does that help? All right. Further questions or comments? Representative Epley.
Must have some stock deals going on.
No, it's a mess when a doctor decides to change your appointment and they don't contact you in advance and they tell you you've got an appointment this Friday and you're not even going to be in town, and then they want to book you out 2 months. Are we good now?
Well, thank you for letting me go there, Madam Chair. I asked for it and I received it. Madam Chair, I would like to make a motion that we move House Bill 2174 into and amend into Senate Bill 175.
Is there a second? Seconded by Representative Kelly. Comment, discussion on the amendment? Representative Arnberger.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I just have a quick question that maybe Chairman Barker might know the answer. Are we saving the state any money by doing this?
Well, then I'll have to do a motion to table until we can get a report. But I don't think that we're going to save any money. My distinguished vice chair in Fed State is always trying to play jokes on me, and but no, I don't think. But I hope it doesn't cost us any money.
Thank you. I just was curious with the publication if this would help. So thank you.
No, but we're already amended it, so it doesn't really need to be changed.
No, but if I could find a way to appropriate, I would do that for you. Don't take me there. Committee, is there further discussion on this? Representative Parker.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'm just in a clarifying mood today. The original House bill that we have the Rural Hospital Act in, can you update us? I know we passed it out of this committee. Was it, it's blessed and below the line? Am I right on that?
Hold up, I believe
or did it die on the calendar?
No, it didn't get run. It didn't get run on the floor, so it was stricken from the calendar. And we knew that 175 was coming our way, and so we wanted to take care of 2174 at the same time.
Okay, I'm glad
so
I clarified. So if we want to see the Rural Hospital Act enacted, this is our, this is the last train out of the station.
This is the last train and the only train in the station right now.
Thank you. Thank you.
It's not like what the situation we have with the BSRB bill. It's a totally different deal. Further questions? Representative Berquist.
just for one more clarification, this bill will remain 175. Is that correct? It'll remain the Senate bill with the other folded into it.
That's correct, isn't it, Scott?
Thank you.
Yes, Madam Chair.
I know, we just love to complicate things in here. It keeps us on our toes. We learn new tricks, new things in the trade.
Well, the Senate gets all the glory and we do all the work.
Well, that's normal,
I know.
because we don't worry about who gets credit. Any further comments? All right, Representative Eppley.
Madam Chair, I'd like to move the last train out of the combination of these two bills. I move my motion.
No, you're amending 2174.
I move my amendment.
Yes, there we go. You've all heard the motion to amend by Representative Eppley, seconded by Representative Kelly. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Those opposed, no. Ayes appear to have it. Ayes do have it. Motion carries. Now we're back on the bill. Representative Eppley.
Still just titled Senate Bill.
As amended.
Madam Chair, I'm going to try then to ask that the committee move out favorably Senate Bill 175 as amended for passage.
Is there a second? Seconded by Representative Kelly. Questions or comments on the bill? All right, seeing none, all those in favor of passing as amended 175 favorably as made by Representative Eppley, seconded by Representative Kelly, signify by saying aye.
Aye. Aye.
Opposed, no. The ayes appear to have it. The ayes do have it. Motion carries. All right. Okay, committee, that concludes our business for today, and we'll see you here at 1:30 tomorrow.